Can you?
Hey, what's up, baby cakes?
Can you stream from Twitch just from Twitch, or do you have to have some kind of software downloaded?
What do you mean, like just from Twitch?
Like, does Twitch have built-in streaming?
You need Streamlabs.
Okay.
Twitch is just like a hosting site.
Okay.
Are you speaking to your mic? Yours is like way turned up from last
Yes,
time.
ma'am.
Not yours, dude.
Check. What? Yes.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Do it again.
Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, guys.
Alright.
Fuck yeah.
What up, Ghost fam? How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the show, the Ghost Show. I'm your host, little Ghost Ari. Got Zephyr.
Shouts out 775 word. What up? We out here in the cut.
Got Braid. That's his intro. There we go. That's fucking. That's pretty slick. Out up in the 775. What's up with the cut? Let's go. We just talk like was it like radio show guys, but like DJs. We're over in 775. We're gonna go to the song next. We're gonna play the song. Play a song.
It's like the opposite of what a DJ does.
What?
They're usually like, alrighty then.
No, not that kind.
Welcome to 775 Reno. We're here in the cut.
Not that kind of DJ. The fucking like the fucking
Like a club
dudes.
DJ?
What?
Like a club DJ?
No, the fucking guys from like black DJs. Hey yo, it's the next song, it's the next hit.
Oh, like
fire
a
ass beat.
fucking... Okay.
Yeah, dude. And then they just go, you wanna check this shit out? All right, cool, bro. And they just fucking play it. You're like, what? All right,
what's
cool,
your
bro. That's the
Twitch
next song.
name? What's your Twitch handle?
Go to my website, use link. Post a link in the story. And then put a finger at it, like doing this. Because people like when people point at things. Tells them how to do things.
Yeah. Yeah. Point somewhere
do,
when you
do,
tell them
do.
when you tell them to whatever, you're gonna tell them. Just point to a corner of the screen.
Yeah, just point to an opposite corner of the screen.
Point to some corner of the screen, and he's not gonna edit in any kind of a link, and it's gonna be funny.
Are you struggling with my website?
I found it.
All right.
How's your
Oh, now my
website
brother's calling me.
going, buddy?
Well, it's not like
Yeah.
anything to keep up with, I guess.
Yeah. Is that Jakey boy?
No, that's my brother.
Do you apologize for all the times he was mean to you?
No.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah. I was hoping he was apologizing for all the times he's.
How do you post this on to Instagram? Do you just copy and paste?
No, there's a like button.
I'm not seeing it. Can you only? You might be able to only do it if you're the host. Because I can't share it.
Are you doing a story?
I can't go on Instagram at all. This is from that's Twitch.
Yeah, so just copy the link, copy it,
Okay.
just like hold it down, copy it, and then go to Instagram and post a story. Yeah, I wish Twitch would make shit easier, but they don't. They don't really care about people on the platform, really. They just care about people who are already big.
They don't want it.
They don't want like ease of use anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to put all your own links on your Twitch. You have to like build in things to do it. You have to like use HTML, or you have to like download other people's stuff.
It's pretty weird.
It's kind of dumb. It's not like built into Twitch. It makes it kind of nice if you want to customize your stuff, but it's really fucking stupid if you can't. You know.
Yeah. Fuck off. Get the fuck.
How often do you yell at your phone? Because I do it all the time.
It wasn't doing what I wanted
I know,
it to.
dude. I yell at my phone so often because it constantly does the
You know what?
dumbest shit.
Look at his
I just
big
had a
old
thought.
clit.
Hi.
We're here on
Hi.
Twitch.
Hi.
Hi.
Here on
I'm
Twitch.
pretty gay.
Get on Twitch if you're on Twitch.
Check
We're
out the
here.
Ghost Show. Let's go.
Why don't people just invest in ideas that they like? You know how there are like cryptocurrencies and there are NFTs and stuff? Like, why don't people just invest in an idea? Like, you could put like whatever, like pro-life or pro-choice or pro-this, pro-that. And then that stock could gain value in money that could be invested and spent on things related to that thing. And it would get proportional investment to what people care about. How could that be developed as a technology, and does that make sense?
It is kind of like campaigns. Campaigns are kind of based off of that
Yeah.
stuff. But like you're saying, like a direct stock,
Yeah.
like the anti-abortion
It's like
coin.
more direct. You don't have to deal with any of that
You just have to create a Bitcoin that's like
based on that
yeah,
thing.
based on that ideology, and then people
And
can
built
like, buy
into
it.
the
Fuck
Bitcoin is
off.
like some amount of it is invested in those kinds of projects or something, and that'd be in the
No, like literally buying the coin invests into that whatever they do. Like if you made a coin that's like kill babies, like the abortion coin. He's like, this is
Yeah.
the kill baby
kill
coin,
baby coin, the dead baby coin.
dead baby coin, and
Yeah.
DVC dog.
The DVCs.
We should totally
Dude,
do
DVCs are
DVC.
tanking right now. Oh no, dude.
Oh no.
Oh, I shouldn't have put all my fucking cash into dead baby coins.
Oh, I should have actually got an abortion
Oh, shit.
instead of putting my cash into it. Now I'm gonna have to raise this fucking thing, son of a.
Oh, I knew I shouldn't have gotten an abortion, but too bad I've lost so much money in tanking dead baby coin.
Oh,
I knew abortion was a bad idea.
Wait, is dead baby coin to like free
Too bad I
dead
played-
babies, or is it to promote? Like the more people have abortions, the higher
It would
the
like be
DBC
like if you
goes?
invest in this coin, the assumption is
They spend more money on projects that.
they're gonna try to make
There's
profits
the higher-
specific. They're gonna try to make profits specifically off of companies that are doing something blah blah blah.
They're gonna
pro-choice,
hire
like those
vigilantes that come with hooks and run around and find pregnant women and just
It's just
yank it out.
just yank that. Yeah.
I swear that's what like Republicans.
You
believe.
just form a whole currency like based off of like one.
You could probably
idea.
tank the planet. Like if your currency, like if you had an idea that's dangerous enough that people like, imagine like, hey, if you
Yeah.
invest in this coin, we will rob people for you and we will redivide the money across, like just like a Robin Hood coin. We will create a group of bandits to rob the rich, and we will reinvest that money into this coin. But you need to give us just enough money to be able to steal from these people.
Well, that would make sense though, because that would be like a return on investment. So that
100%.
his harebrained scheme actually would work. But that's the general idea. Is like, I just now had this thought. It probably does. It's probably stupid because no one's doing it. But
I don't
just
know.
seems
That
hard to
doesn't mean it's
implement.
stupid. That just means no one's thought of it yet. I think it's
I'm
kinda
sure
smart.
Someone's thought of it now, just because of everything that's going on. I couldn't
Well,
be the
I
first
am.
person to have.
I can
this
tell you,
thought.
I've already invested half of my wealth into Robin Hood coin and Dead Baby coin.
Very good.
Yeah, DBC is the next
It's the-
GBC.
It's the next meme coin.
What does Robin Hood have to do with stealing? Is that actually what that's for?
No, that's just a.
Robin Hood is just like the app for digital currency.
The story, bro. Robin Hood, the fucking.
Yeah, he's invested in the Robin Hood coin. And
Yeah,
it's a bunch of vigilantes that are stealing money.
Robin Hood was
And that's his
originally a
return on
character who
investment.
stole from the rich and gave to the
I
poor.
know who fucking Robin Hood is, but it's like a digital. It's like a digital
you're saying, like,
currency
why-
wallet.
Why? Yeah, like why do they have a thing called Robin Hood for digital? Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
I'm
Why
just-
is there an app called Robin Hood?
But so there's no Robin Hood coin. You're
Don't
just fucking.
no, I'm
you're just
saying
fucking
there
around.
should be a Robin Hood coin where the
Okay.
whole like architecture of the coin is based on supporting people who steal from the rich and give back to the poor.
Right. Which is
I
mean,
fully endorse that idea. Someone invent Robin Hood coin,
Yeah.
steal from the rich, and give back to the poor.
Who's gonna do
But
that?
steal from the
Who's
bad
gonna do
rich, please.
Who's gonna
Steal
do it
from, like,
and
the
how?
good rich.
Like,
What? What do you mean? Who's gonna do it?
you have to have like some dude that's
Cyber hackers.
Yeah, that's who it would be is cyber
Yeah.
hackers. But how, like, obviously if they could do it, they'd be doing it all the time.
They already do, but they
That's
do it
what
for
they
selfish
did with
reasons.
like PlayStation Network had that.
Yeah, they
big
just did it to
scandal.
Lex Friedman. Well, not him specifically, but like a thing that he uses just got hacked. He had like 600 terabytes of information on there.
Oh, so because these cyber hackers have a cause, like it makes more sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like what is the cause? The
and we're
fucking
funding
mask.
it.
What's the mask guy? Vendetta, V for Vendetta.
I don't know.
Anonymous.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of like internet fucking goons gathered together and became anonymous or whatever.
Whatever
that
happened
is.
to anonymous?
Well, it's decentralized. It's never like a thing. It's always just whatever the message is anonymous. Everyone is anonymous. If you have a
Right.
message, you can put on the fucking mask and say it to people. But there are like dedicated accounts to people who have the most following in anonymous, and there are people who started it. But the whole principle of it is it's completely supposed to. There is no leader of anonymous. It is whoever bears the mask.
Yeah.
Bruh.
Is this like is this exclusive to the internet? Like internet fucking what are they called? Mason whatever the Mason the stone
Freemasons?
The Freemasons.
Stone
Is this like that? Is this like the internet version of Freemasons? I never honestly.
People think it's like the Illuminati, but it's like they're like anti-Illuminati. They would be like the antithesis of the Illuminati, the apotheosis.
That's a good word. Do you understand now, Zephyr? Jesus.
Except that, as good as that word sounds,
Except
it's
that
actually incorrect.
the Illuminati
Apotheosis means like
Illuminati
full embodiment.
is like there's no evidence that they exist. It's like could be a totally made up thing.
I think there is evidence that they exist. It's just not evidence that they currently exist.
What does that mean?
I wonder what.
There is undiscovered evidence that they exist.
Yeah, there's evidence. We just haven't found it yet.
No. There's evidence that they exist, like in the past. Like historically, there have been Illuminati or whatever.
Like that's a real word. That's a real reference to a real thing.
Yeah, that exist. They would like the Illuminati existed in like the Knights of the Templar, like in like like the Dark Ages.
I played Assassin's Creed 2. So.
Yeah, like that's like it's like loosely based on like real things, which is like really creepy. Like there's like even references to like Illuminati existing in like Egyptian culture. Like they were the ones who illuminated things.
Right. I wonder when they
were the path to knowledge and light.
Terminology like that specific group came, because I feel like the torch has been passed on down. I think the Knights Templar stemmed from like Greek time. Well, I guess did Greeks
It'd have to be a Christian thing.
Did Greeks in Egypt? Well, no, but it was passed down pre fucking Christianity. Like the Egyptians were part of like they had secret.
Well,
Yeah,
every
they're just
government has
pre-Christian.
secret police.
However,
though.
the Illuminati, if they were part, so a lot of people, the hypothesis is that the Freemasons passed a certain degree, so a certain amount of like financial influence or investment into.
The Knights Templar wasn't exclusive to Christianity. It was the Knights Templar is a transition between like a secret organization that existed totally pre like the Crusades and all that.
I'm gonna Google it just because I'm
think so.
curious. But kind of side note, but slightly on the same thing. You guys can just like buy like Roman coins online,
That are like real,
cheap, ancient Roman
because like
coins.
Rome
Here's
is
the thing:
failing as a state.
we have so many Roman coins. The thing is that like they're painstaking to clean, so you can buy them for dirt cheap.
And if you clean them, they're worth.
You
like
just
a
have
fuck
to
ton of
clean
money.
them. I don't know if they're worth a lot after you clean them, just because there are probably a ton of them in the world. But
Really?
you can just get for
What are they
pretty
made out
cheap,
of?
just like a couple bucks a coin. You can get. I think it's mostly like bronze alloys.
I feel like they could just
A lot of
sell
bronze
you
coins.
dirt and you wouldn't even know.
Yeah,
There's like a clump of rocks.
If they're
and you'd be like,
selling these for like pennies on the dollar, then what are they actually?
Well, I've watched videos of people cleaning them off. You do have like at the end, you have
Yeah.
like, this green.
no, I'm saying
just
like you could
bury
get
a
totally
fucking-
scammed though. Is
You
what I'm
just
saying. Is
bury a
like
coin for a couple of years.
No, not even that. I'm saying there's no coin. Like people could just sell you like a fucking clump of dirt. Be like, there's a coin.
Well,
here.
It would be cool. Though,
the only reason I'm bringing this up
actually
is because it came up
existed.
on YouTube, and I watched a bunch of different people who were cleaning Roman coins and then explaining from their knowledge, because they were obviously dorks, like what era this came from and when this was minted, and they can even tell you like to what city, and they were showing you like the references they used to figure out. Like they can tell you. It was really interesting to watch.
Did they use
Pretty
carbon
cool.
dating?
No.
Were they that nerdy?
They weren't that nerdy.
Okay.
They look at the stamp on the coin, and they'd have like some kind of reference guide, whether it's on the internet or in some
That's
kind of
actually
book.
pretty cool.
And they were really knowledgeable, so they'd be like, this is what all the symbols on the coin mean, and this is the year and the city that it was printed in. They could tell you stuff like that. It was really cool.
Are the coins like numerically numbered?
Yeah. They're unique.
So you
just
can
like
get,
our coins are today. They could
like,
tell you exactly when and where it was printed if it's a good enough coin.
Is it Roman numerals?
You can get yeah.
Because if that coin comes with a fucking 1 on it, or like a 6, I'm gonna be a little bit suspicious.
No, yeah.
Like a barcode.
Yeah.
You're like, what is this?
Yeah,
they don't think they had barcodes back then.
I just learned recently that they're dirt cheap. You can buy them online.
Yeah, it has like a QR code. You can scan it with your phone.
But
yeah, that's pretty cool. If it's actually a thing, I feel like someone could very easily just
fake that.
Fake an entire. Uncle Beanbag says Molaminati. You never heard of Molaminati? Moluminati? What the fuck are you saying?
He's Molly and he's in the Moluminati.
They're like the mole people. That's
Yeah.
that's what they are. What's his name?
How's it spelled?
Hey, Uncle Beanbag. Thanks
That's
for
a good
the
name.
thanks for the rabbit hole. The YouTube rabbit hole that's gonna.
What is
pop up in my browser.
Molaminati? Explain what the fuck you're saying.
It's like it's a fucking joke. Move on.
Yeah.
He just moved on for sure. He has any sense.
No,
He
dude,
has
like,
2 brain cells to rub together. He's out of here.
if I like my most prized possession would for sure be a Roman coin that's minted DCLXVI.
A 666.
The 666 Roman coin.
What are they called? Roman coins. What were they? Did they say what they were called?
I think it's just Roman coins. Just coins from like antiquity, classical antiquity.
I like a cool name.
Like what they call them back then, though.
They didn't call them Roman.
You're right. I only know what they're called. I know Sesterti or something like that.
Right.
Sesterti, I think, are Roman coins, and then drachmae are Greek coins.
Oh yeah,
dude, I want some drachmae, bro.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Dude.
Yeah, I bet. But that's the thing is, apparently there are tons of these fucking things, and it's just that like they're very time consuming to clean because you have to actually like.
It's so silly.
Well, you can make your own coins, right? Back then, there wasn't like a mint. Like there was a mint, but
they're
like
pounded into copper.
Yeah, but like if you had your own copper,
well,
you could pound like your own coins.
Well, every city would pound their own coins.
During the Roman
coins tended
Empire,
to be made locally.
Currency was like super well developed by the Roman Empire.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Exactly,
though,
policy,
like,
and they understood it was abstract at that point.
If you had copper, you could easily pound your own coins.
Maybe
You just have to like fucking steal someone's stamp, or they stamp it.
Yeah, I don't know.
It'd be way easy to counterfeit coins back then.
Yeah.
Dude, people couldn't even
in
fucking
between
read.
fucking
People couldn't even read. They'd be like, "That trust me, dude." And they'd be like, "I guess if you say so."
Well, that's the thing, though. The government was always like, I bet the government was in control of the production of like copper because tin was a rare, super rare material. So if you want to make bronze, like you'd have to get that imported. And Rome was getting a lot of it from like places like Britain and stuff, which is far flung.
Imagine being black during the Roman Empire and getting like arrested. You couldn't even get shot. You just get stabbed to death. They just pull out their swords.
I wonder if that was a thing. I wonder if that long ago
the police still hate black people.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like why people just hate Jews for no reason.
I think we were
just, like,
strictly on
Jews
history. In the Roman era. We were like strictly no Jews.
But Jews were black because they came from Egypt.
But they didn't in reality, though.
But they came from Jerusalem. But then
Yeah,
migrated
they've lived
through
there
Egypt
for
because of slaves.
dude. That didn't even actually happen.
They
There's
never migrated
there's
to
no actual genetic evidence of that or history of that. They've just always been living in their
You've been
area.
watching too much SJW channel, dude.
No, that's in the Bible. A lot of people think that there's that actually
Abrahamic
happened.
shit,
There's no historical evidence for that.
Yeah,
they always just were living
pissed
there.
off about it.
I mean, there might have been some Jews were probably taken slaves as Egyptians, but I don't know. I don't know of any. This is just what I heard. There was a big university out of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem that went on this long excursion into the wilds to find any evidence that there were ever Jews in Egypt. The Egyptians never wrote about it at all. It's not in any Egyptian record
They
at all.
had slaves. They just weren't sure if they were.
But the idea that they overthrew the Egyptians with magic and then ran across and found their promised land. That's all crap. They always lived there.
One guy named Moses just made up a bunch of shit in Jerusalem. He's like, guys,
he just found a bunch of desert
people. We freed our people. I am the sole survivor. Here are the 10 Commandments.
Then he didn't save the people, though.
Yeah. It's well, I tried, but there was the sea thing where we parted it, and it got a little messy. You parted the whole sea. Fucking walked straight through. No, he probably said no, I just walked from Egypt and to here, and they're like, there's a sea between here and Egypt. And he's like,
you just make.
I parted it.
Yeah.
God came, they were chasing us, and I was just like, God, please give me the power, and the waves just told him. That's. Could you imagine if the entire if you went back in a time machine and you just watched this fucking street urchin lie to the entire Jewish people and they just bought it, and you're just like, that's why we have Christianity? Could you imagine?
I mean, it's probably more or less what happened.
Could you imagine though? That's what happened though.
Some dude named someone Moses did something really cool, and the story grew over generations because they would tell them,
He created a wave, and people were like, "Whoa, that was a really big splash," and it just grew into he parted the seas.
He swapped it. He threw a heavy rock in it. He was showing some kids that it makes a cool sound. Plop.
Yeah. It's he parted the seas and we all ran free from the Egyptians and their alien technology. That part's taken and put in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Their alien technology they used to levitate blocks and build the pyramids.
Could you imagine though? What if you went back in time and you saw that shit though? You saw Moses lying to all the Jews, but then you also saw Egyptians just going, oh, through sound technology, levitating these 10-ton stones, and you're like, what is
Oh shit!
And then some aliens just flies right by and spits on everybody. Dude, what if aliens made Zoom sounds?
Zoom sounds?
Zoom. You know what I'm saying?
They probably fly past you real quick.
Yeah.
Make a Zoom sound.
Oh, dude. I hope aliens are cool as fuck.
They're probably silent, dude.
They don't have mouths.
That's just exactly what aliens sound like.
Yeah. They make their particles just reassemble in the next place that they want to be. There's no movement of air.
They're just inside mushrooms.
Yeah. Well, among many other things, yes.
Yeah, I feel if they got advanced enough, you could definitely just become part of the quantum ether that makes up reality. And there's probably many layers deeper of whatever this is made out of that they are trying to control and understand. And then we're just here existing as parts of their thoughts.
Aliens probably have their own aliens too.
Oh.
And they're probably worried about the next layer down thing. That's fucking looking at them, dude.
Oh, dude, I do not want to know what aliens are scared about.
Yeah.
I just don't. Bro, that would be the worst. They're there is a devil, but you don't understand.
Yeah, I don't even know if we're capable of... If we think aliens are the craziest fucking thing, you can't really even imagine what they think is the craziest thing.
That reminds me of a thought that I used to bug me at night in college was... If you think about just the universe, right? And you have this infinite expansion, but it's expanding in well, technically it's not expanding into anything. It is just its entirety. But whatever boundary of the expansion that exists, the outside of that, the other of that, which is non-existence, what is that like? How vast is it? Is it different? Is it made of different things? So the outskirts of the, not even the outskirts of the universe, literally the parts that are unbounded to the universe, the framework in which the universe expands into, what is that made of? And is it made of stuff that can be understood, but just not resonant inside of our universe?
It's made of nothing. Depends on how you
Depends if there is more other university stuff, or if our universe is the only stuff. Right. Or are there more universes?
If there's, say, multiverse theory is like, say that you travel into a black hole and there's another universe on the other side, like whatever that theory is, where every black hole is like the portal to another universe.
Like the expansion of another.
All of the universes that are contained within that system are part of some bigger universe, right?
Yeah.
And most of them are gay.
Yeah.
There's not shit going on there, and your atoms fall apart when you go there.
Here's where the idea gets really confusing.
Maybe.
And probably improbable and impossible, right? So I go to this idea to just frame it for the context of the thought experiment. You can't teach an ant calculus. Calculus exists. At least to us, there's some framework for which we can understand things through this thing we call calculus. You cannot teach this to an ant, but an ant is subject to its forms. It's subject to its structure, right? Ants do death spirals. These things can be calculated through calculus, right? You can understand them and you can almost entirely understand an ant's behavior through just calculus itself. Like, they're so predictable. They're like little robots. But for whatever reason, you can't, no matter how hard you try, ever get an ant to conceptualize calculus the way you do. Now, what level of stuff or things that exist, or of knowledge, is inaccessible to humans based on that same principle? Now, expand that same concept, right? When we going back to multiverse. Let's think of an infinite scape of multiverses where everything possible exists an infinite number of times in an infinite number of variety of ways. Now let's just add the axiom that the impossible exists. Conditions in which things that we can't understand also can take place, and they may be paradoxical to us, but let's just assume that impossibilities, like SpongeBob being a living entity in its own universe, exists. Or that up and down equate to the same thing, 2 and 1 can be the same thing. The boundaries for which we understand mathematics just dissolve, and other things that would be rationally impossible can exist in this space. And then you create a framework. So you have what exists, and then you create a bound beyond that, which is what can exist within this space. And then you say everything else to that is just unknown, the unknowable, things that are beyond, which can't exist, like the impossible and the possible, right? And then you go infinitely in these bounding directions. Now, this idea approaches the thought process of this idea is to try to assume what is the most unknowable thing. What is the thing that cannot exist the most? Something that no matter how hard you try to explain it, get to it, define it, there is no thing that it is. You will never get anywhere. Even the conceptual framework for getting around this concept is impossible. And what space does that exist in, and what is that? And I think that's what aliens are trying to figure out.
Well,
I got real fucking high when I thought about that, and in college I would just lay awake.
How advanced are these aliens?
They don't. It doesn't even have to be that advanced, right?
Well, it seems pretty advanced. What the problem is, it's beyond our comprehension. Anything beyond our comprehension is
technically the unknown
by nature.
Not necessarily. It's beyond comprehension, but not beyond
comprehensibility.
Like not even like the probability. What did you say?
Comprehensibility.
Comprehensibility. It's that it's not. So even things that are beyond our comprehension, like how AIs work, we can still build them and interact with them. I'm talking about something that's so far beyond any level of that literally me talking about it is pointless because I'm not actually getting closer to explaining what I'm talking about.
I think
it's almost like every direction that I would point you in to go find this thing is the wrong direction.
That thing doesn't exist because you can't talk about it.
Yeah, but if you so we asserted that there's an axiom where things can be paradoxical. So the impossible can exist, just not in the way we understand it. And now I'm talking about a thing that's beyond that, many magnitudes further.
Sure.
So it gets more and more impossible to talk about. It's already impossible to even get close to something that's kind of like it. But there is nothing that's kind of like it. There is no thing. Right?
Yeah, it's nothing. You're talking about nothing.
But there is something that's sort of kind of like what I'm trying to get to.
Sure, yeah.
But is it that thing? I don't know.
Nothing is still something. It's just nothing.
Nothing is not something.
Yeah, nothing is literally not something.
Nothing can't be a thing.
Depending on how rigorous the definition is.
Nothing ain't something, dude.
Nothing is absolutely a thing.
It's a noun.
There's such a thing as nothing. That's why we can say it. That's why we have the words for nothing.
No, nothing.
But we don't have the analog for nothing in reality. We have the word
because it's not part of reality. It's part of nothing. It's part of
that's what we're saying. It's not a thing.
Yes, exactly. But it's a thing in that we can say that it's not a thing.
But it's the paradox of
that's
nothing,
what I said.
Right?
It's a
as
noun.
Soon as you say it's a thing, it's now a thing, and nothing can't be a thing. So you can't.
It's
approach
no
it.
thing.
Yeah,
and you're saying it's something.
It's not even possible to talk about, but it is a thing.
No, it is
as
no
thing. As soon as you assert that it's
and
a thing,
you're
it
saying
can't
it's
exist.
something.
It's like the opposite of like witnessing a particle.
But wait, something conceptually existing, like the number 0, like 0 as a concept, like 0 as a quantity does not exist. Nothing as a quantity does not exist. It certainly exists as a concept.
But that's the thing that I'm trying to... With nothing in that sense, yes, I agree. Nothing can exist as a concept because you're not defining it as a thing. You're defining it as a parameter of understanding.
Yeah.
So you're not saying that there's anything a part of nothing, but you like as soon as you start saying nothing is a thing, that's where you run into a problem where it's like, it's for real. And it's like, but it's not. But you can say that it's a concept. However, what I'm trying to get at is you can't even say it's a concept. And that's where it gets... And not saying it's a concept is just like the layer beyond the impossible. That's just that layer. And then there's millions and millions of infinite numbers of layers on scales of infinity that get infinitely larger in terms of the number of contradictions or types of things that can or cannot exist in this paradoxical fucking nonsense soup.
The omniverse.
And I think that's where the ancient ones lie.
The ancient ones probing around in that omniverse.
I believe in, like, I don't know if I believe in a god, but I do believe in ancient ones. I don't know what it is, but they are there.
The ancient ones?
Yeah.
They're out there?
Yeah.
Floating around and shit?
They're just, like, not even a part of any of it.
They've become
They're
a
just,
fabric.
like, yeah. They, like... It's actually kind of, like, a concept I was exploring in, like, the storytelling for the video game that I want to make. Is, like, you have, like, the gods and the demons, right? In this, like, universe style thing. Sort of like Bethesda has, like, the Daedra and, like, the deities. But then you have the observers, or you have the ancient ones, which are, like, people that created it but aren't a part of it. And then you have just the observers, which are the most mysterious force in this world. They don't interact with it. They just observe it. And you don't know why. And you don't know what they're doing, what their plans are, why are you interested? But there is no concept of them pulling strings or doing anything to change it.
I don't think anyone's here observing.
What?
I don't buy it.
You don't buy the observers?
By the aliens in general. I'm like, man, those are birds, dude.
They're just
Shit's birds, bro.
Bro, dude, if a fucking pigeon was like, get in my spaceship, I would fly. I'd be like, no, I don't want to go to this planet.
Pigeon smoking a cigarette. Yeah.
Get in my spaceship.
Get in my spaceship.
Come on, you little bitch, get in my spaceship.
I'll give you a back wing if you don't get in my spaceship.
Okay. What is it? It's like flipping a coin.
Do you want to see Bird World? Do you want to see Bird World? Can I get a drink up in this motherfucker?
Yeah, they're in the fridge.
All right.
You know what I'm saying, dude? Like, what is like? I think like clearly it's a foolish pursuit to even try to like get close to this idea, but for some reason it doesn't feel foolish, and maybe that's like the pushing the boulder up the hill idea. But I think this unbounded space, the space in which things can't be bounded, is where
all you can talk about is the boundary.
No, you can.
All that you as a human being can talk about is the boundary. You're incapable by nature of what you're saying. You're incapable of talking about the thing that you're talking about.
Yes. Even the approximation of the thing.
All you're doing is you're hitting like you're at the edge of the universe and you can't go any further. You're not allowed.
How fucking annoying.
You're not.
You're like, let me in. You're like that fucking meme that Eric instead of be like, let me out. I mean, literally, that's what it would be like to be at the edge of the simulation. The rules could be so dramatically different. You wouldn't even be able to conceive it. Especially if the simulation is purely, like, based in, like, what... So, think about it this way. Like, you know, we have hardware, and that's, like, the physical thing, and then the software is just this thing that's kind of, like, virtually doing something in the hardware, but in reality, that's actually still like mechanical movement. It's still atoms and it's still quantum fields kind of doing a thing, right? What if you get so advanced that there is a civilization that can create literally virtual reality? Not like what we think of, but like a literal virtual reality. Things that aren't a part of reality. The physics and the things that, like, they're literally can't exist in the reality, but they can still have domain over it and control it from this reality.
Then you just get this fractal shit going on. Does it? I wonder if it probably gets lower resolution every layer down. I wonder if that's true.
But only if it's subject to the same rules we have now. But if you're creating a virtual space, the rules of our physics no longer apply. I just
wonder if you can make the virtual space a level down, the same fidelity and resolution as the world you're in.
In computer simulations, no. You can't, because there is a fundamental like mathematical principle that says as you get lower down, you can't actually create that much information. You're always going to have less information capabilities.
That's what I would assume.
But what I'm saying is literally stepping outside of the domain of our physics and being able to manipulate things that are what would be literally virtual reality. Not virtual reality like digital reality. Virtual reality.
But in this layer.
Not in this layer. You'd be in a different thing. There's not technically even a part of the universe anymore.
But the physical analog is in this layer.
The controller is in this layer. Does that make sense? The screen is not.
Right.
Or the experience is not in this layer.
The experience is not, for sure.
So the rules, and it's just like if you created
But
a
it
multiverse.
is. If the physical analog is, then it is in this layer.
Think about it this way. Think if you created a multiverse, right? And the fundamental way that the particles set themselves up at the beginning were different. The initial conditions are different. So there's different physics. So things don't work the same.
Yeah.
Now, if you took things that are in this universe and you created tools
and you
to
simulated
touch things,
that one.
Not simulate it. You
want
to
to touch things
inside
in the other one.
Yeah.
So okay, let's stop here and talk about that. How do you think that would work?
I don't know.
Do you think that would be possible? Is there like, that's interesting to speculate about, that if you could simulate the rules of another universe, maybe you could interact with it? I've just never heard anyone say that before.
You
That's
could create
truly an original thought.
But then, so yes, so we can go there and we can think about that. And I think you're right. I think you're on the right trail. If you can simulate, if you know what universe that you're touching and you want to interact with, then you could do the same type of mathematics and simulative structure, as so long as the way the universe works can be somewhat represented within a structure, right? So there's probably plenty of multiverses that can't actually, there's nothing that we could do to understand them. There's just no structure that would, there's no Lego pieces in our universe that could build a representation of that one, if that makes sense. Now, if we could have Lego pieces in this universe that could tell us how that one is working, the structure of that universe, then yes, I think we could interact with it because we would know how to like engage its physical properties, especially if they were fairly similar to ours. But the further you get away from the similarities, the harder and harder it is to interact with it. But what I'm saying is just think of the principle of, I'm not saying that we are let's say we create something what if we just created our own multiverse, not in a digital form, but literally we've done something to the particles here that expel a entirely different structure that is not even connected to this one, but can be influenced by this one.
How would you know that it exists?
Let's say that it's theoretically possible to do so. So let's say that there's a certain type of condition that would say that you could do that, and it will exist, and there are ways to interact with it. That would be like a true virtual reality.
But you're incapable of perceiving.
But is it, why not, why do we talk about a virtual reality that exists on another plane as opposed to one that exists physically in this plane that people or entities live within?
The reason I would say this is because when you have a structure that's like unbounded by the constraints of our universe, then you open possibilities that can no longer, like that your horizon, your ability, your framework in which you can create and do things opens up. And so I think about it in this way. So what is the best way to put an analogy to this? So ants can only think of so many things because of their neural structure. And let's say an ant's neural structure is analogous to the structure of our universe and our ability to do things. It's very primitive or whatever. Now let's say there's a space outside of that allows for more possibilities and more connections between things. And that would be like the human brain, right? Our ability to conceive and understand things at a much more vast level. Now, if an ant can play with inside this space, it can better manipulate its own universe. So if you step outside the constraints of our universe and you think about it sitting inside of a place that's larger, a larger domain, now you can start to assume tools and technologies that would better control things here. The same way it would be easy for us to control an ant. That's how you teach an ant calculus. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you make it like...
You have to step outside the constraints of the ant, think of a larger domain space, and then feed it back into the ant.
Does it know it's doing... How does it know it's
doing
it
will once you feed it back in. You could change the information. The ant and the human thing is probably... It's more of an analogy. Like, that's how you teach an ant calculus than like a really physical way of doing it. I'm sure there's a lot more science behind if you wanted to do that.
But the ant never knows that it's doing calculus.
Here's the thing. I think maybe it's not within our ability in our domain to be able to understand how to teach an ant calculus. But if we stepped outside into this larger domain, there's probably an answer for it. Your every domain is a larger answer set of possibilities.
So in the higher domain, you
unpredictable
could
things.
teach the proverbial ant calculus because you've changed the rules of the game.
Change the entire rules of the game.
In some
It doesn't have to even make sense to the rules of the game now.
yeah.
The game's rules are far different. It's just like when you take psychedelics. I bet that's what they're fucking doing. I bet there's a rule set that you're interfacing with, and that's why things, like even when you're in dreams, you're like, why do things fucking work this way? It's a completely different rule set.
Yeah.
Yet you can logically do things, theoretically in a dream, that seem logical, that have predictable outcomes so far as you understand in the dream, but are completely impossible in this universe. Or the universe as we have control over it. Which, to me, kind of beckons this question that there is a larger domain set of answers and possibilities that we just don't even understand. And I think when people take psychedelics, they open their mind to those types of things. Those are the machine elves.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's impossible to just fly as a human. Well, maybe not.
I think that's what we're always...
Just jump out a window right now.
I think that's what we're always approaching, though. Like, that's what the expansion of whatever consciousness we have is. The further you dive into knowing something, the closer you get to whatever it is you're talking about.
I don't know if it's the expansion of consciousness, though. The expansion of consciousness is like sort of just consciousness is just along for the ride. What we're looking is evolution. So you're looking at something iterating itself many times over and then doing a different thing some of the time, and some of the time that thing continues to happen, and then it iterates and iterates and iterates, and there's a different thing in a different state every time.
The ant's ability to understand the calculus is the ant's consciousness expanding to understand the point of what they're doing.
I guess if we want to be very specific about what we mean by understand.
The ant can't know it's doing calculus until it knows it's doing
real
calculus.
Ant's brain isn't big enough to know calculus.
Right, but if we're talking about the universe in which we've negated that limitation.
Technically, an ant's brain is big enough to know calculus because its body does it. So there is enough.
That's like the higher
power.
Level influencing.
Yeah, there is just no structure inside the ant's brain.
The higher level is
it.
influencing the ant to do the thing. Yeah. Why would that have to be the case if like in our own domain, like there are natural impulses to do these things that evolve for rational reasons like survival. Why would there have to be a higher plane that influences the lower plane to follow these rational patterns if these rational patterns exist in nature on their own by necessity?
Yeah, so to me that concept that kind of makes me think of. So there's this it's called E8. Have you ever heard of it?
I have heard of it, but I don't know what it means.
So
I couldn't understand it.
It's like a 74-dimensional object.
84-dimensional.
Yeah, some ridiculous.
And basically, it's 86. No, it's 84.
Once you get into
I don't care.
Once you get into dumb physics, once you get beyond like the basic understanding of physics, there's several hundred dimensions.
Yeah, that we say that are possible. So here's the thing about E8. It's most likely probably not what's really happening, but it could be a direction of what's happening. So essentially what the concept is as you move up in higher dimensional structure, right? So if I take a cube, right? And it's like just it's like a hollowed out cube. You can only see like the lines that connect all the points, right? So it's just like the faces of the cube. And I shine a light on that, and I shine it straight down through the cube. You would on a table, you're going to see a square, right? The cube's 3D, but when light passes through it, you're seeing the 2D representation of it, right? So what happens is like if you have a 4D thing that exists somewhere, when you shine light through it the same way, you will see a 3-dimensional object. You can scale this up infinitely. The number of dimensions, as they increase, the 2D representation is what will appear on the table, right? Well, the level down. So like if I had a 5-dimensional thing, there would be a 4-dimensional cube reflecting, right? And then you have to take a light to that 4-dimensional cube, and it would just keep shining down until the dimension that you're in is what you're actually seeing things as, right? So this 8D hypercube, which is made of 84-dimensional components, is essentially how E8 works. Is essentially it's saying when you lay out this structure in a 3D space, this structure is very analogous to how all of the particles interact in the universe. And you can take each point in correlation, what are they called? They're called, point, you understand what I'm saying, when point and like a line's drawn to it and there's another point. So you're taking each one of those points or axes, right? All of those correlations are mathematical representations of how other particles have weight on each other. So when you take E8, a lot of how the structure of the universe works and its relation to itself can be represented by this hyperdimensional cube.
Okay.
Well, 8-dimensional cube.
And that's why people talk about it.
And that's, yeah. And so I don't remember what my point was. Oh, no, what you were saying is, what were you saying?
Well, I think the question is just like, what does that mean? But
No. Before this, you were telling me about like
I
how
don't remember what I was talking about. Not a chance.
the forms, the structures. There's the rational behavior, the patterns that you see in nature.
Okay.
Those are essentially the 3-dimensional representations of higher dimensional objects moving through this light. So it's kind of like a shadow show, like you would do in a cave with like stick figures. We are that. And when I was on mushrooms, actually, when I think about it, I took a lot of mushrooms, and we are basically the projections of like Greek gods, is how it represented itself in my mind. So these archetypical ideas of human nature are really the most fundamental things that exist. They're the most true. And we are these weird representations, these shadows of those things. And that's why being human
That's like
is
that's like kind of platonic. Almost.
yeah,
Yeah. You know what I mean?
exactly. That's what Plato, I think, was getting at, is especially when you think about how shapes work. And if you wanted to be like really hippy dippy about it, you could be like, you would say source, God, light, whatever, is the fundamental thing shining through and creating these shadows onto the surface of reality. And we are just the 3-dimensional representation of this hyperdimensional like source energy. We are the shadow of God.
I see what you mean. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so all of our rational behaviors and everything like that are not necessarily things that we're doing right now. They are predetermined paths and structures that exist in the shape that has already happened.
Buddhist and Hindu.
Yeah. And that's why when you take DMT, you realize that's what it is. When you see these fractal figures, oh, that is the fabric in which I am literally like a paper cut being like moving.
That's an idea I think about a lot.
Yeah.
Just because of like Ethan and my dad. Those just like the people I happen to know.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. It is weird.
It's super weird. And then when I took mushrooms, like the gods were laughing at me because I was like, I just want to know what you are. And they're like, you can't know. Yeah. They're like, haha, like you can kind of get it. You can kind of get it. And only because we're kind of letting you get it. But we are you, but we're a truer you. And I am like, literally, it was like really weird because I was like, oh, that's what a god is. A god, I am just a shadow of a god. I am literally.
But in a Jordan Peterson sense, are these god things just like the idealized forms of certain virtues that you imagine yourself to be aspiring to?
Yes, they are the direction in which your choices can point in life. So these are literally, like if you had a compass, these are the things that the compass can orientate itself to. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all good. And that's what I found out on the mushrooms. There are demons. And the demons are what, Jung talks about as the deeper parts of, and when I discovered that, it's like, oh, this dimensional figure of whatever God is in this light of source and the shadows that we are as a part of that, the structure of this is not all nice and happy.
Now this is all Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Yeah. The structure of this is evil and demented, just as much as it is good and wholesome. And not even evil and demented in like, so think about it in this sense. So as a human, you can say morally, like if you wanted to be very nihilist about it, technically nothing matters. Technically, as far as if you were just to scale back and not think about all the other shit, nothing matters. Moral virtues and stuff like that are just constructs of how we engage with things based on what they're going to do for us, right? It's very bad in society to do very bad things to people. But in the grand scheme of the universe, rocks don't care if you rape or pillage. They really don't. But this architecture, so that's one scale of evil. The act of desire in any form or whatever. But the creepiest thing is it doesn't care. So you don't get to decide if you do evil. You don't get to decide what you are. You are the shadow of evil. The actions in which you think are morally reprehensible are just you playing out the shadow of the structure being that thing. So that's what the demons were showing me when I did mushrooms. They were like, you don't get to choose to do evil. We are the evil. And when we represent you, when the light shines and your shadow shows, you are our intention. That's what being possessed is. You are the intention of the shape. You don't get to choose what part of the shape you are. You just are the shape. But you can reflect on what part of the shape you have been. And that's where it's fucked up.
Yeah, that's pretty mad. It's pretty.
So you can look back and see.
But whether or not you reflect on it or not, it still just depends on what part of the shape you are in this analogy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets complicated behind our representation. But, and, God, I need to stop saying it because they told me not to say it. But I'm going to say it anyways in defiance of the gods, even though that's a terrible idea. So when I asked them to do this, they said, okay, well, you can't tell anybody this because it ruins the game, essentially. And it makes me feel really douchey for even doing it. But basically, to finish my concept, there is this, it felt like a mother's yarn, a wholesome, like not even, like the great mother, the mother of all things, like fabric of reality. But it was just, the way it was painted to me, I was staring at my wall, and the wall opened up into this fabric of multicolored, like, yarn. And I was overwhelmed with, like, the feeling of what it felt like to be in, like, preschool. Like, when you get to go to, like, a teacher's class and, like, you're just, like, for no reason, just happy and existing. You don't know what reality is yet, and you're just there doing things as you do them. And it was even purer than that, because it was even, like, the first time, it felt like the first time I've ever opened my eyes, right? To ever see a thing. And it opened into this beautiful fabric of, like, color. I can only describe it as yarn, but it was deeper than that. And the yarn was made of an ancient love, a love that was so deep and fundamental to everything. And when I realized that this is always here. This is what it is. That is the entirety of the shape, right? Regardless of all the other features, that is the shape as a whole. That's when you get to experience the whole shape, right? And then I was like, it was like so overwhelming and beautiful. And then it told me, don't tell anybody. Everyone knows this, but you're doing this because you want to. You're here. You can see it. Sometimes we show it to you to make you feel better and more comfortable about what's going on. And it made me feel like, oh, this thing that we're doing as people is a very small part of the whole thing that we're doing. Whatever it is we're doing, this is like really small. This doesn't mean anything. But this can be still just as scary as anything in any other part of it. It's just as terrifying to exist here as anywhere else in this shape or whatever it is. And sometimes you just need to see like, oh, we're just playing. It's still this thing. It's always been this thing. There is no other thing. This is just part of, like, you are doing this for fun. And that's why you can't tell people about it. And if you tell people about it, I'm going to show you the demons. And then they showed me the demons. And that's when I got, like, really scared. And I cried a lot. Well, first they showed me the gods, because I was very curious about that. I was like, okay, well. And then it was just, like, these depictions, like, almost holographic, like, cutouts of, like, mythical gods is, like, the best way my brain could represent it. And they were just kind of, like, acting out human intention and desire, but in the most perfect, beautiful way. And I was like, oh, I'm just a fraction of that desire and intention of the gods. And then then my brain was like, oh, and there's demons. There's gods, there's demons, there's a flip side. And then they popped up and they were like, yep. And they were not as holographic and beautiful. They were more sticky. Gooey. Heavy.
Put heavy, sticky goo in you?
Yeah, they did. And I just cried and cried and cried.
And why, what is the reason behind whatever this entity is saying not to tell anyone?
It's because this is a game. It's kind of like when you go like, you lost the game, and you're like, fuck. I did lose the game.
The entity, yeah, you can't be enlightened. You won't build something if you're enlightened. You'll just sit under a tree and be like, this shit's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, they need you doing stuff. They're like the government.
Yeah.
You already are that thing, though. That's like what's so weird about it.
They didn't build you to be enlightened, dude. They built you to fucking do shit that had to happen. Like build civilization and then create artificial intelligence and stuff.
Yeah, you got to be the shape. That's sort of like the task, is to be the shape.
But you don't have a choice in the task. It's not the task. It's going to unfold either way. It's the is. If
they
this
say
is the correct way of thinking about it.
There is a choice, which is really weird. Because
what are choices? I thought a lot of this sort of suggests already that we don't believe in free will.
I can't say that this is what enlightenment is, because I'll never.
There's no free will in this analogy.
There's the illusion of free will.
I don't know if there is.
That doesn't matter.
It's tricky because it's not that the shape isn't.
It makes
like
the
stagnant.
game less depressing if they let you think that you're making a choice.
Maybe
it makes it easier for you to accept the fact that you're not
all
making
the enlightened ones.
Here's what I'll say about free will: if an infinite number of possibilities of possible and impossible things can exist, and you can be any infinite number possibility of those things at any given time, determinism doesn't matter. There is no determinism.
I'm just talking about
it is pure freedom. So freedom is the only thing that exists.
It doesn't matter how many possibilities there are. It just matters what you collapse into and whether or not that's just the laws of physics making you do that or not.
Or you think, because this is what the weirdest part about this is, like, the yarn told me, Mother Yarn told me, this is here all the time. It's always in front of you. You just have to open your eyes.
You guys should go listen to Portal of Yarn by Chicano Batman.
Do not say there is a Portal of Yarn. Like, is that a real thing?
There's a song by Chicano Batman called Portal of Yarn.
Maybe. Oh, dude, if he saw the same thing, is that what it's
about? Well,
it's
crazy. Well, the thing that I think is great about Chicano Batman is that they, like, a lot of their music reminds me, like they're writing poetry as an escape from, like, whoever told them not to talk about this thing that you're talking about, that your entity said, like, don't talk about this thing. Like, like the lyrics that they have and, like, the way they write their music is like they're
being told not to talk about this thing that they're talking about.
But they're like writing, like, poetic versions of what you're talking about right now.
I just realized, like, if this thing, like, why would it tell me to not talk about it? It knows I'm going to fucking talk about it. Like, it knows me more than I know me.
Yeah.
It knows the structure of whatever I am.
It just doesn't want you to talk to every stranger you see, you know? Freak them out.
Yeah, some people are going to be
It told me to not talk about it because it knew it wants me to talk about it. But it wants me to be confused about talking about it, so I keep my mouth shut just at the right times. Now it's going to have to tell me a new rule. Because I'm too fucking, like, in my head about it. It's going to have to okay, guys. I don't know if I'm seeing the right thing, but you guys need to update me on some rule sets. Because I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about it or not. Maybe that's the point.
But does there have to be this higher reality influencing you, or are you just high on drugs? And is that a sufficient
maybe
condition?
I'm not okay with just influencing myself, because then I have to take responsibility for all my actions.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So I have to create a higher entity, just like the Christians.
Maybe.
To justify all their
Christians
things.
aren't bad. Don't give Christians a hard time.
The Crusades are pretty bad.
Well, yeah, they did some bad shit. They did some good. They did a little on balance. I think.
I don't know.
Christendom's pretty cool.
Anti-gay stuff is
They had
pretty
their
bad.
time. Yeah, they're definitely
I
they're
don't even know
old
if
now.
that's Christian, though.
They're just old now, but they're pretty cool. That's still cool stuff.
I don't know how much of like Christianity is just anti-gay, or it's how much like bad politics has like poisoned Christianity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, well, I don't know
Christ
about
is just
they
like,
didn't
no,
like
you can
gays
suck
forever.
Dicks, it's fine.
No. I think they didn't like gays forever. I just think, you know, I think people throw out a lot of the baby with the bathwater. I think it's good. It's good old stuff. There's a lot of good stuff.
How many people had to do that for that to become a saying? Oops.
I still don't know what that means when you say that, and you say it a
Throw
lot.
the baby out. Oh, it's just an old
There's
expression.
a baby in a
It
bath,
just means
and they used to throw, like, they had a fucking tub of water that they got from the river.
Yeah.
And then they bathed the children and or their clothes or whatever in it.
And then it'd be so
And then
dirty that you wouldn't see the baby, and you'd be like, I have to throw this trash out. Like, I have this. So what that expression means is, I have this old trash. I need to throw it out. But you didn't even.
You
notice
throw it
that
back
you
in
have
the river,
baby.
and it's gone. So if you throw the baby out with and you would go to the river to do it. So, like, you're not going to take it all the way home. You're going to fill the bucket up there with your baby, wash it there, and then throw it back into the river. But if it's dirty, like you said, there's a chance that you thought you took the baby out.
But then you end up throwing something valuable away with the dirty bath.
You're just letting your baby, like, sink under the. You're letting your baby's head
I grew up
sink
with
under
a
the
lot of
waterline?
old timey expressions. My mother
let it
says a lot of
soak.
old
You
timey
gotta-
shit.
Yeah, you gotta get the head all nice and fucking.
They got to get all pruny before you let them out.
If you're not drowning your baby for a couple seconds, then
This is like,
it's not really clean.
Yeah, it couldn't be clean.
Isn't it so crazy that we just exist? Like, we drowned in the womb, but we drowned so well that we just have oxygenated fluid in our lungs.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, we're just breathing womb fluid.
Don't we have like gills until we're?
Probably. Yeah. They just kind of recede into necks.
Isn't that? Don't humans have like some kind of weird fucking gills until they come out of the?
That's how weird we are. We don't even realize how weird it is. Like, just like the formation
Until they
of
come
a
out,
human.
I don't know about that. Dude.
I think.
Dude, how psychedelic is that? Like,
Their
just to
fetuses
think
their
have
about.
gills
gills,
close up
dude.
or until right before they come out.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we're about to get birthed. Like, suck back in.
We're talking about the fucking universe right now, dude. I don't
I don't know. That doesn't make sense. How do you fucking? You
I'm
can't.
gonna Google right now, even though I know this will damage my online persona for decades in the eyes of this massive corporation.
Google's just like,
Do fetuses have gills?
Dude,
I don't
that's a
think they
weird
do.
list you just got on. That's a weird list.
How do fetuses?
Oh my
breathe?
god, it heard me say it. It came up in the search bar, dude.
No way.
Yes, it heard me say that.
And it's like, is this what you want?
Babies do not have gills.
Thank you, Google. Thank you. I'm so glad you answered it.
How do fetuses breathe?
So they have
Fetuses.
structures in their
Wait, do you
throat
really
that are
think
eerily
that-
similar to gills in the first couple of weeks.
No, the structures are not how they breathe in the fluid, dude. The gills don't work. They're not functional. They're just they're
How
parts.
do you breathe when you're inside a that's what I'm asking.
There's oxygenated fluid in your lungs that you are. It's like a pressure lock. You are breathing in like a really oxygen rich fluid the entire time that you're in there, and you get all of your nutrients through your belly button.
Can you breathe liquid though?
Yes. They've actually tried to invent technologies like this. It's actually part of a movie called like The Deep, where they have an oxygen-rich like gel that they breathe to dive really deep, because if you use air, your lungs will collapse. But if you use the gel, it's thick enough where your lungs won't collapse.
Right, it has to be able to come in and out of your lungs.
Yeah, they use a rebreather, but it's gel. It's actually like I think
babies get their oxygen in liquid form dissolved in the blood of the mother through their.
It's through their belly button. They don't even breathe. Yeah, that's even crazier.
And I guess
that's why you have to smack the fuck out of the baby.
The things that look like gills in babies don't ever become gills. They do become gills in fish, and they become our jawbone.
Imagine if your body got confused. Like, how fucking sick are genetics that they don't get confused often, right? Like, imagine how bad it would be if you gave birth to a fucking fish baby thing. Like, halfway through, it's like, are we a fish or a baby? I don't remember. We have gills. Like, your brain's like, the gills.
I still feel like a fish half the time.
What?
No. You kind of look like one, too.
Yeah, I said I feel like a fish half the time. I should lick these rocks. You know?
They do lick rocks.
What if I could just lick rocks?
And like just like dust comes up.
I went to the
like
reef store recently, and I was looking at anemones, and I was like, oh my god, I could be a person and pay all these taxes and like deal with, you know, all the complications of life. Or I could have just been a butthole. I just could have been a little like throbbing butthole in the ocean, in the warm tropical ocean.
Could you imagine how fucking horrible, like how strong you must think if you're like a fish? Like you must think you're like really strong because you're just like flying around everywhere. Like, but then as soon as you go out of the water, you're like, what is this?
I bet they're like anything. They're like anxious little fucking pieces of shit, even though they can fly. They don't think about it. They probably just like, oh my god, I'm scared.
You gotta be real anxious to have eyes on both sides of your body,
dude, they're
but not
terrifying.
in the middle. Like you're just like.
360 view, dog.
Flounders are like autistic then, because they kind of just like, why put the eye on this side? We don't move off the dirt. And then just like fuse to the other side. Like evolution's like, okay,
I guess this one's weird.
Just pushed it up there.
That is a pretty weird animal to evolve over time. Like, where was that eye for a long time? Did
where
it go
was it
around
before?
the outside?
Yeah, like,
or did it fucking...
Did that go straight through? Like, it like saw its own brain for a millennia? It's like really wise. It's like, we are becoming... It's like the pineal gland. It's just like, it gave birth to all the DMT on the planet. Just like... And then it's like, oh no, we have laid in the dust too long.
It'd be weird. It'd be interesting to talk to that fish. Yeah. I'd like to meet that fish if I could meet any creature in history.
It'd be really funny because you could totally peekaboo them. Like, just turn them around. You're like, peekaboo. You're like, where'd you go?
Yeah.
What the fuck is this podcast, dude?
Dude, I don't know.
Welcome to the Ghost Show.
That's like the funniest animal to like torment of all the animals. Just like a flat fish with a face on one side.
It really, like, what is that?
What part of your body am I torturing?
Yeah.
You know? I'm going to threaten you, you know?
It literally looks like how a kindergartner would draw a fish.
Yeah.
It's like, no, Timmy, its eyes go on the other, it's a fucking flounder. You're like, what? It exists, okay?
Yeah, if I drew one of those like to my kid, she'd be like, my dad's retarded, you know what I mean? I don't
your kid's actually just like really smart. You're like, that's not how fish work.
Like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
You're
not
not
one eye, you fucking moron.
Yeah. What are you doing? You suck at drawing.
That's like the flounder was made when God was going through like a Picasso phase.
Or maybe Picasso just took a fish out of the river and bred it into that monstrosity and fucking
I bet you
it
could
back into the world.
I heard a really cool story. It's definitely fake, but it's based in like loose events. But it's just like a cool like weird mythos that I've never like looked into, but it kind of has its own entire mythology potentially. It's basically about like being in like the 1800s during like the renaissance of like cadavers and science and like stealing bodies. And this one guy becomes obsessed with mythological creatures, and he thinks that they can still exist and that those are like the true forms of things. But for whatever reason, we have like banished ourselves from heaven, and we are no longer allowed to be so perfect. So he looks at all these mythical representations of things, and he takes parts of different animals and then sews them onto live animals. Like he'll take wings from like a bird and sew it onto a horse, and like a big bird. It'd be really fucking funny. It's like a giant. Anyway, I just thought about how goofy that would be. In this thing I was watching, it had really big feathers, but I thought like, what bird is that? Like, what bird has feathers the size of a fucking horse? None. There's no bird.
Like that.
Yeah. But anyways,
0 birds.
But yeah, I was thinking about that, and like, what a crazy myth. Like, so the idea is he went like his family like rejected him, science rejected him, but he got better and better at it, and then he eventually he started opening up a circus, and he was showing people all these things, and it got tracked. Like, well, people hated it in the U.S., but then he moved to London, and they really liked it there. And people were still kind of disgusted, but they were way more like, yeah, cool. And then he's like, but then he started putting like human heads on it from cadavers, and like he would make a harpies, and they would move. They would like the wings would move, and they would scream and squeal, and he eventually like got his circus burnt down, and like everything like bad shit happened because people were like, that's too far. And then, as the last note he ever wrote was to his brother saying, like, hey, I'm done with this shit. You know, I'm packing up my bags. I'm going to kill myself. It's more poetic. And then he was never seen again. But his wife was also never seen again. And in the note, he wrote about how beautiful she was. And he hated to see her stuck in a human form. And his proudest achievement is being able to finally represent her beauty in what he thought was the most beautiful form. And it doesn't say what that form was, but he thinks the story basically ends with the assumption that he made his wife into a harpy, and that she still roams in places today.
Where does it come from?
I don't know what the origin of that story is, but it's like very interesting mythology, because it reminded me a lot of like steampunk kind of stuff, like because it's kind of like on the outskirts of like steampunk kind of like ideas, but it's like steampunk meets like Lovecraft, but in like a more measured way. Like this would be like a Lovecraft story if you said that someone was controlling his brain by like an alien was like, wah, like showed him images of things.
It's like a cooler Frankenstein.
Yeah, it's like a way
or like a
Frankenstein
that.
Yeah, but it's not even like really a horror like a horror genre. It's more about like there are actually mythical things. They just don't exist anymore, but we can create them through science.
We can't create them through science. I don't know. Well, maybe we can create it if they're practical. But I don't think they ever existed or exist. I don't actually think.
Oh,
that,
yeah. But like that was the assumption in the 1800s.
Oh,
right? That was like the concept.
This is an old thing.
Yeah. An old, like, well, technically I think it's a modern story, but it was written, it's written like as if it was like the journals of this guy who did this, or like his brother's account of his like crazy brother who did this stuff. And it's written as a book that's like supposed to be true. But like if you pick up the physical book, the book reads like this is a real event that happened, right? But it is a fictional story. It's not a real thing. But they did use names of people who did exist and did do kind of things like stuff like this, which begs the question. Like that's why it's such an interesting mythos, is because it's so rooted in potential realities of the day that you don't know.
It's kind of like the Book of Leaves. If you ever heard of that,
The Book of Leaves.
it's called, or no, the House of Leaves.
The House of Leaves. Ooh.
Yeah,
I think
it starts off where like
your brother told me about this book. I think.
yeah, this
Or maybe, no, we
this
were-
family like moves into a house in like Tennessee or some shit, and there's like something wrong with their like remodeling. I don't remember what the fuck is happening, but they measure the outside of the house and it's like 14 feet across or whatever.
Mhm.
And then they measure the inside of the house and it's like 3/4 of an inch larger. Like the dimensions
Yeah.
of that
They're like,
inside
"There's
of the
no way,"
house
are
are
larger
larger,
than the
than the
outside.
dimensions. Yeah.
They're like, that's not possible.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
but it reads like these are, it's almost like a documentary
Yeah.
written in a book form.
Yeah.
Like it's meant to
To feel real
like it's real.
the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like, so there's a story of the Yellow King. You heard that? It's a really, really interesting story that I've never. It's more of like a collection of short stories of different authors, but around the same topic, around this like really weird conceptual topic. That is like probably one of the most intensive. It's the most meta literary topic you can probably start like to write about, at least in the day. But I will tell you after I piss.
It's time.
I've always wanted to genetically engineer dog-sized bats.
It's 9:10. Dog-sized bats.
Just like house pet bats.
That'd be pretty sick.
Yeah, something that would snuggle on your couch. You
I
know,
think there
it's
is pet
genetic.
bats.
Well, yes, you can get a pet bat,
Insane.
but I want to
A
once
dog-sized.
technology comes far enough, I want to make giant bats that are dog-sized, that are clean of disease, and that have good personalities. Will hang out with you on the couch.
Just make yourself a harpy wife, dude.
I don't want that. That
You
sounds
don't want a
gross.
harpy wife.
They're like half vulture. They're
No.
just like vultures with tits.
No, they're like horses with vulture
That's a s-
wings with tits.
I don't remember there being horses involved with the harpy.
Nah.
No.
I thought you were I thought he was talking about something about horses.
So the story we'll end the podcast with is like this Yellow King story, and I've only had an introduction to it, and it's sort of like kind of like a scholarly pursuit to understand it, really. But what's so interesting about it, and this is my understanding, and I could be completely wrong. But so the story of the Yellow King itself is supposed to have been this very popular like play in the mythology of these stories. However, this play, only 2 lines are ever written directly from it, the play The Yellow King, in any of the novels that talk about the Yellow King. And they're like these short excerpts that talk about like Donovan went from the staircase to see his beloved Elizabeth, but she had already gone to the fucking whatever, poetic nonsense, right? But the story is like those are direct passages. Like there's only been 2 direct passages ever taken from the Yellow King in this mythos.
What mythos?
Yellow King mythos. It's part of Lovecraft,
Okay.
which is like a larger mythos, but it's a part of it. So the Yellow King is like some type of like god in the mythos, but the Yellow King is more than. It's really weird because so those 2 passages were the only time it was ever directly taken from the play in any of the stories. Everything else is sort of talking about the play indirectly or directly, but not literal passages. And and it's a collection of like short stories of people going through different things. Like a guy marries this girl, and then, or this guy is like a fond of this girl, but she marries somebody else, but she doesn't want to be with him, and she wants to be with this guy, and then by a force of nature, this guy gets really sick, and the other guy tries to kill himself, but it doesn't work, and then the girl ends up being with him, and they live happily ever after her estranged husband dies, right? However, the point of the story is that that whole incident is very loosely based on what happened in the tale of the Yellow King. And then all of these short stories that happen to real people inside these collection of short stories are basically shadows of what happened in the story, the play of the Yellow King. And it's a warning to authors to be careful what they write about, because there are some strange influences in your pen that go beyond what you can understand. You can literally, through your pen, influence the reality that lies before you. And it only takes you to write of it. And so when you write down these tragic stories of what, like, this girl falls in love with this guy, inevitably that will happen to real people. They will fall into the fate of your pen. And that's kind of what the Yellow King is about. And it just, like, is a really cool story to me, because it kind of relates back directly to what we were talking about with, like, the shadows and the casting and the gods. We will fall into their pen, the ink of their pen. We are the ink of their pen, essentially, at some point.
But they don't give a fuck.
No, they just keep writing stories. That's their job. They create the stories that we inherit as the characters.
That's pretty trippy. Yeah. It's almost like...
we are but players upon a stage.
It's like referencing... It's like how a significant... There's like three main things that all of literature references, which is like the Bible, Greek and Roman mythology, and then Shakespeare are like the three most referenced things. And like the Yellow King is like the thing that's referenced in this other reality.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like the Yellow King is like the Bible or Shakespeare of this alternate
It's more like
reality.
the Shakespeare of this alternate reality. Yeah. And these plays play out over and over again. But the Yellow King doesn't know that he did this. It's just the play The Yellow King. Like, that's just what it is. But somehow, the events in this play keep taking place over and over and over again to people. And there's like a deeper kind of like Lovecraftian lore even behind the Yellow King. Like that it's like this thing that
like
wrote
so
the
many
stories
people
on purpose.
read it and knew about it in this alternate world that they use those events to like structure their understanding of events in their own lives type thing.
Yeah, and I think that that's part of like the grander Lovecraftian thing is people use the story of the Yellow King to do what you just said. Like they can predict the future. And it's really creepy. Which, by the way, brings me to this idea I had.
So ridiculous.
To think about. So think about this. Here's the story of the Yellow King in real life, right? So there's a guy who made a website that basically it's when you play with infinities, every possible thing is done. Now, if you play with an alphabet, the infinite alphabet, all possible language, story, or combination of words has been written in this infinite alphabet. And he has created a website that basically indexes this infinite alphabet, right? He has a software. It doesn't represent the whole thing because you can never, there's not enough bits of information in the universe to ever do that. But you can type in any phrase you want, and it appears inside, it's indexed into a particular part of this infinite alphabet, right? And you can go to the website and you can type it in. Now, how his code works is maybe like suspect, like maybe it just embeds itself into a string of like characters or whatever. But I think you can like show that this existed prior to you searching it, right? So people can search things that will happen in the future, and that exact phrase has already appeared in the thing. And so what's really interesting about this is there's another completely separate guy who studies literature, and he uses AI to understand the beats of a story. And what they do is they develop predictive models to see what the story is about based on just the words alone, right? There's no like, they take 100,000 like words and they say based on the number of thes and thises and sads and sorrows in this work, we can tell you what story rhythm this is and what type of story it is, like what happens in it, like who are the characters, what is the plot. Now, my theory is if you develop a similar AI to start looking into this index and you ask it what is going to happen in the next 10 minutes in this particular area, and it finds sentences, right? This is like it. This is someone's gonna, and you do things on purpose, right? You pick up a bottle and put it down. So you look for that phrasing. You look for very general things. Your name, picks up the bottle, puts it back down on the table, right? Some sort of like narrative structure to what just happened. You ask this AI to find that particular thing, and the more it finds it and then predicts correctly what happened after what you told it to do, the more you can find chunks of this infinite text that are actually identical to what's happening in reality. So there must be chunks of this infinite text that really do play out exactly how the universe is going to work, right? That are completely predictive. Now, it would take a human an infinite amount of time to ever even utilize that. It'd be impossible. But an AI can do it very efficiently. And then multiple AIs can do it very, very efficiently. And then they can teach themselves to even get better at it. And then you can train an AI to pick based on, like, you could say, what is the percentage? This is the better way to do it. Instead of saying, like, individual, very vague, like when you pick up a bottle, what will the stock market say tomorrow for this thing? Is it up 10 points, down 10 points? What is it? And then the AI will pull back a series of predictions made by this infinite text. And then the ones that are accurate, those AIs get to live. That AI structure that pulled that text back, that gets to live. And that grouping of this infinite text, these regions of it, they get to live on to the next generation. And you predict tomorrow. And then you predict again. And you predict again. And the ones that remain the most right are the only ones that get to live. And then there's you basically start asking it to predict further and further ahead to see its accuracy. So instead of just the next day, it has to have the next day correct, but it also has to have next week correct, right? To make sure that the future telling of this story is going to be accurate. So now you can start predicting many, many months ahead. So you can find this particular region of story for how the world will work that will be 100% accurate to what will happen in the future. Because it's all already written. Because you're using an infinite number of characters. It has to be already written. And all you've done is train an AI to find the correct region in which the characters seem to line up 90% of the time to what will happen. You see what I'm saying? That's how you literally can predict the future.
I do see what you're saying. That's interesting. It makes sense.
Good. Because I thought about this a long time ago, and I tried to explain it to my cousin. He has just looked at me like what? But I didn't know about this other research that you could actually predict story beats in literature, that people were designing AIs to do things that were like kind of similar. Well, what benefit is just predicting the beat of a literature when you could literally predict what the stock market is going to do tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm assuming they have computers that do that already.
Well, they have computers that do it based on the numbers and the algorithms, which aren't correct to what will happen tomorrow, right? That's just the context of what's happening. It can be predictive. That's how our brain takes in information, right? But if there is something that already has it written,
how does a computer search through infinite text?
you just say, hey, pick a region here, and then search through these lines, and then once that prediction is either true or false, you ask it to pick a different region.
So it just pokes around.
Yeah.
Couldn't it poke around infinitely?
Yeah, but it doesn't need to. So the reason you kill off the models that aren't accurate.
More likely that it would poke around infinitely if there's infinitely more correct space to search through than incorrect space? Which there would have to be, because you're talking about a limited set versus an unlimited set. So it would run forever and never find anything.
That's not necessarily true. You have to ask it very specific things. Right.
So that it has an inkling of where to look.
Yeah. So you ask it very specific, and so it's not that like the one time it brings back the correct answer like that's correct.
Like a program that's searching an infinite set and knows where to look. Does any analogy to that exist?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that like is a thing that anyone's done. I'm sure maybe for like prime numbers.
I wonder if that's going to be the point where it falls apart. Is that you just can't search an infinite set for a finite solution.
Well, no. So what? I think this is where you're losing me. Is you have the infinite set, but you can pick a region within this infinite set.
That seems logical, but that might still be like infinitely large.
Well, so the infinite set is indexed, right? So if you're looking,
it is necessarily infinitely large. Any set that you pick, other than the one that you're looking for.
But here's what's really interesting about this set is it's not just a random string of numbers. It's a random string of text, and you can type in the text, right, that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So let's say you ask this AI to predict what this the market's going to do tomorrow for this particular stock, the percentage, right? And it says the Dow Jones is up 3%. It will also say the Dow Jones is up 66%. It'll say 100 million %, right? All these things are going to feed back into the AI. But the next day, you get to correct it because you get to know what that is.
Yeah.
So, and you also get to know where it's searched in the set. So you say where you were searching is correct. Stay there and tell me where it is next. So eventually, there is a string in the set in this infinite set, and there's an infinite number of these strings, by the way. They're saying the exact percentages day after day, exactly how the stock market is going to close. And that's what you're searching for.
Yeah, okay.
And then you just train it to, the more accurate that is day after day, you send more AIs within that region of the set, right? Mm-hmm. To find it. To find, like, narrow down what part of this chunk that you're looking at actually has that predictive model in it. So a faster way to even do it is to see which ones have predicted the closing of the stock market in the past. So you just type in the closing of the stock market every day. You say the Dow Jones closed at 66%. And you do that from the beginning of Dow Jones until today. And then you see what the next day is in the next part of that line. If it's correct, then you're on probably a really good chain to look at. And then the AI can just predict models like that even better than we can. Like it will be very easy for the AI to find the structure in that pattern and be like, oh, well, yeah, maybe if I just look back at the past, I'll be able to inference the future for this set. And you can even, the more general AI becomes, you can actually just tell it to infer those types of things.
It does sort of assume that, I wonder if this assumes that those things are rational, and if those things are just irrational, if that would be an inherent problem.
Well, it doesn't matter. So the predictive model is, so this is why you ask it how many weeks in advance, right? So once you start to find it to predict the next day correct, over and over again, maybe for a week, you see if it can predict the next whole week correctly.
But what if it can't?
Then you move on to a different set.
But is it necessarily true that a set will work eventually?
Yes. It has to be true.
Because you have
An infinite number of sets will work eventually.
That comes back to the initial question of how do you make a computer search an infinite set?
You're still localizing it, right? Like you're still trying to find.
Because you're already writing the branches to test this reality.
Yeah, you're already telling it kind of where to start.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, just keep being more accurate. And then really the AI just start using. If it's
irrational, then like you.
Eventually, it will be wrong, but there will be a set that's 99% correct most of the time. You might get lucky and fall onto the region of the set that's saying the correct information all of the time, or at least for the next 40 years. Especially if the last 50 years was correct.
But if it's infinite, then you'd still have an infinite number of like sets that have been right,
and then wrong,
and then are going to be wrong the next day.
But you would also still have an infinite number of sets that are correct.
Yeah.
So it's like a 50. It technically is still you don't know the next day.
It seems like this cancels itself out somewhere. It's just something I'm not sure.
Yeah. There is still the 50-50 probability that it could be wrong. But if it was right for a period of time, the predictive probability of it kept increasing the more you used it.
But I guess it's like a fundamental question is that like would you find that that's even though it's happening, it's circumstantial, like when you get a crowd of 100 people to keep flipping coins and then you find that and you eliminate parts of the crowd, and you're like, wow, you really flipped heads 10 times in a row. The probability of that, and you say something like tiny number, you calculate it, right? And they'd be like, wow, that's crazy. But it was also inevitable to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It was designed to be inevitable, so it's like interesting.
Yeah. Well, the true test is if the AI that's predicting the thing, regardless of how irrational or rational the set is, if it's better predicting than current other models that are using different things. So if it's predicting at a better rate than current models, then you should still trust this one more.
Yeah. But wouldn't you have an infinite number of... You'd always have an infinite number of sets to choose from, and I assume half of them would be wrong every time, though, still.
Yeah. But you still have half of them that are right.
Right, but you have to bet on
that. No, but like you get to the point where the AI or whatever is predicting it, there is one that's still making the correct answers.
But you won't know that until the day that it happens, because you have to check it against reality.
Yes, but let's
say
an
infinite set.
Let's say
if you're searching an infinite set, the set of right answers is like.
Well, here's where it gets tricky,
boundless.
Right? So, if you do this, imagine this. This is where you can prove free will. You find an AI, right, that could say, hey, describe the actions of the guy in this room. So let's say that the person has some multitude of interactions that he can do. Let's say like a giant number of interacts. Like he could press any key on this keyboard, right? And you have the AI searching the text for which key he's going to press. And then you maybe find some text that not only has his name and what key he's going to press, but you find text that has his name, the color of his shirt, and what key he's going to press. And then that one gets more accurate every time you make him ask to press a different.
You like the keys he's most likely to press. Wouldn't it be like a probability distribution, like he's most likely?
Everything is a probability distribution, though. Yeah. Nothing is 100% accurate. Right. So that's what we're gaming at. We're gaming for the probability distribution that this is mostly right all of the time. So if you had an AI, if you read text that in the next 10 seconds, participant B in the blue shirt named Kevin is going to press W. And Kevin in the blue shirt presses W in the next 10 seconds exactly. That would be fucking terrifying, right? Yeah. Especially if there is some sensical pattern of narration that's taking place.
Wait, how is any of this evidence of free will? You said that a minute ago.
Well, you wouldn't be able free will, like if there is a thing that is predicting what we're going to do every time. If there was like some narratives, this is where it gets tricky because our language isn't complex enough to conceptualize all of the actions that people will do, because there's an infinite variety of ways to explain how people can do things. But let's say if there was a perfect narrative structure that could do that, and you could research that library, and that library could feed you back answers. Then you could actually determine, based on that description of what's happening in the next 10 seconds, whether or not the person didn't do it or did do it, especially if the model was accurate in the past. Make sense?
It does make sense as a thought experiment.
But then it's also still subjective, because now that I think about it, it's still just kind of probabilistic. You actually never know if what it's getting back is going to say
you don't know
the
what
correct
set
answer.
to pick, and if it's infinite, there are like infinite sets to pick, and it's not going to be 50-50. It's going to be less than that.
Well, that's the question. Maybe there isn't. Maybe that's what you find. Maybe there isn't an infinite number of sets that can fit within our domain.
I think it would. My intuition about this is that it would fall apart, and you wouldn't be able to predict the future. You discover it's like theoretically or conceptually impossible.
I wonder.
But then again, if you just said like computers could be better and better at modeling the economy, but then that's like based on people's choices, and technically there's nothing in physics stopping from people changing their habits and patterns and things. It's weird. History's weird, and sometimes it turns on a dime, and like a whole country is militarized for a generation, and like stuff's weird.
Yeah, but could you imagine if you like found a chunk that talks about every point in history accurately within this text?
Right, and what's the probability of this thing?
And then the next chunk is going to be in the right order?
But there's an infinite number of those chunks.
True.
An infinite number of these chunks, and like a tiny percentage of each of those chunks would be right every time, but it doesn't matter, because even though each of these chunks is infinite and boundless, the bound it does have is it's much smaller than the former chunk and the higher.
I see what you're saying. It's still going to be up in the air, but I guess it is
smaller
just really
level
interesting.
infinity is infinitely smaller than a higher level infinity.
The question though is like, is it actually less predictive than just us guessing what will happen next? If there is something that historically
that is a good question.
If there is something that has historically for the last like week and a half,
I just don't know how you search the set.
Well, you search the set by just saying,
because it's generating the searches.
Yeah, you type in the specific chain of text.
Yeah, you're searching it. You search it manually, or you have a program that searches it.
So you type in a chain of text that literally is a strip of like, the entire history of man.
I just don't think you can predict the next day, because the next day of search results is going to be infinite again.
That's only if time hasn't happened yet.
No, because you still always but then again, if time has to happen for you to check your set, then you don't know what to search. Like, it doesn't work. It falls apart, right?
What if you search the set about what you're going to do next? And
you'd have to verify it with what you do.
Yeah. But what if you purposely try to do something else?
But you can't do something else, because it's going to search an infinite number of things in this.
No. But like, let's
source
say
code is an infinite number of things, and you're going to search against it.
So if you wanted to prove that the set is working, at least for the time being,
the set can't work.
No. Listen to this. So if you have a person in a room and you say, this set has predicted every keystroke you have made for the last hour and a half.
That has no predicted.
Right. Wait. For the last hour and a half. Now, the next keystroke you're going to make, it says, based on the next, well, you could say for the next 10 minutes, you're going to make these keystrokes in this particular order. Some unimaginable order that would be so impossibly hard to, like, a number of keystrokes that would be improbable for someone to remember, right? For the next hour and a half, these are the keystrokes you will make. And you tell them, And you also tell them, do not make these keystrokes. Make different keystrokes. And if they still make the exact combination of those keystrokes, then you know you're in a predictive set. So that's also how you prove whether or not free will exists. At least for some chunk of time. Some chunk of time, so for as far as you've researched the set, as you've observed it, it has been true, right? So if I say you're going to do W, J, and L, and I say don't do W, J, and L, because that's what the set is saying you will do next, and then you do W, J, and L, regardless of me telling you not to do it, and then if you don't trust other people doing it, you ask yourself to do it.
I don't think that's logical. It doesn't make I don't think so for some reason, because
it's trippy.
It was totally up to probability whether or not once you tell someone that they would.
But that's what I'm saying. That's the question it will answer. Is it up to probability?
That wouldn't be a good way to test like whether or not. I don't know that I would believe the results of that experiment. I feel like that seems like a questionable experiment.
So if you give someone an inordinately large amount of keystrokes to make that have no, like you say, this thing says you're going to do this.
What's the predictive model? What lies underneath all of this has to be a model of reality that is using to predict, and that's what all of this hinges on.
No. There is no. So it's not that it's predicting reality
at all.
Problem.
It's
that's
exactly the problem. Because you're still searching infinite sets every time. You can't do it through searching infinite sets.
No. Listen.
You have to have a model.
Listen, the model exists within the infinite set, right? So
I don't know if it does.
So if reality is written out, let's say that like everything that will happen. It asks a more fundamental question about time. So like, let's just say that physics can predict what particles will do to an exact accuracy if it was good enough, right? If we were able to understand everything that we need to know about every individual particle at once, we could predict every possible direction it could go in, even in the quantum states. So, if there was something in language that could describe a generalization of that, like someone will press W,
that embedded within that would be the same logic of the universe. That might be an assumption too, though. I'm not sure if that's right, but
you see what I'm saying?
Interesting point.
Yeah. So if I say that somewhere in this infinite set is exactly what is going to happen in the future, it's already written out. Guaranteed, because you can always go back and search it like the next day. You can always find it there, and you can search it the day before. It's there, but you don't know if that's the truth, right? So the way to find out if it's the truth is to literally tell someone, "Hey, this is what so far the predictive model has been correct. We've been secretly looking at it, not telling you that you've been pressing the keys that it's telling you to press. So it's a blind thing, and we're watching you press W, and it's saying Jared presses W, and we found a string of things that tells you exactly what you're going to do." And so far, it's been correct. Now, to test this string, we know what you're going to press next. We're going to tell you what it is. And then they also do the same thing for a different person, but they don't tell them what it is, if you wanted to be more scientific about it. But we're also going to ask you to not press those buttons. We're going to ask you to press these buttons instead. And if they press the buttons, or the keys, that the predictive set has says that they would press, instead of the keys that they have been instructed to press, then it's possible that the predictive set is correct. Especially if you gave the inverse information to the other participant and then they still press the keys that they were supposed to press. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. That's interesting to think about.
So you kind of subdivide, and it's not that it's going to predict correctly a future set of keys. It's that for this particular fragment, we can prove that within the next amount of time in this text, that this is what will happen.
I don't know if you can prove it.
Well, we can prove it based on the observation, right? And then the question is, does it be... Well, this is why you can prove it is because
like the infinite problem
why...
of the next instance.
How could a person, especially if you told them, like, press W... right?
This algorithm,
and they don't press W, and they press J because the thing said that they would press J. How would they know to press J? And then it's an inordinately long amount of strings. So they're pressing J, K, 2, 3, 4, 5, 132, and then you told them to just press 3 things, but they keep pressing the exact string of those numbers.
There's always an infinite number of next words in this lexical thing.
Or what happens when
There's always an infinite number of the next thing, or however many words there are, maybe is the bound, right? And it's going to search against that, and you have to test it against reality to know what happened. And you're always going to have.
No, I see what you're saying. I see that, but I guess if you wanted to test,
I don't know how it ever becomes predictive. I don't know where the jump is, because you're always testing it against current now. And you have an infinite set every next time to search. If it's just based, there has to be a model.
I know what you're saying.
There has to be a model underneath this more than just words.
Yeah. Well, I guess the model I'm asserting to is that if a person is instructed to do something different and they do what the model is saying, for that period of time, you know that model is going to be correct.
You don't know that, though.
Well, so here's what you do know.
Because you don't have a model.
Well,
you have an infinite array
so
of models.
Here you go. This string of information that's being read is, how do I say this? It's more not even predictive. It's that it doesn't. So this is what it does. It doesn't tell you that you're on the correct information, but it tells you that you're closer to the correct information than anywhere else, at least for this given period of time that it's happening.
That's only if the model that it's operating on is already like all-knowing enough to. It has to have direction.
Well, we have to make the assumption that there is a string of words that says exactly what this person is going to do during this minute, right? And that could be anywhere in the
In
infinite
hindsight,
set.
there would be an exact set.
Yes.
Of
So that's what
that
you're
happen.
asking the thing to find, is can you find within this given time a set that's predictive of what will happen? And then if you can find a set that's predictive of what will happen because you tell someone to not do that thing, then you know you're closer to a set that's going to say what's correct next. Maybe, but I do see what you're saying, because you still open up the possibility that the set just goes into gibberish after that.
I think you guys are representing an AI trying to solve this problem.
Oh my
And
God, that would be really
when the
fucked up.
AI tries to solve this exact problem, it goes back and forth between like it's like infinitely conflicting itself, and that's what the fuck you do. You've been saying the same shit for a half hour.
We really have. We've been talking about.
You've
this
been
for
saying
way too
this.
long.
You guys have
Stuff.
been
It's
like
fun.
giving the same point for 30 minutes. And like using slightly different words and like
really
honing in on this thing.
Yeah.
But it is a fundamental, like, it's a non sequitur. Like, he's right. It can't be predictive.
Nah, I disagree.
I don't disagree. I think he's 100% right.
I think
but it can be potentially more useful than current models.
I think it could. I don't know whether or not it would work.
Because
I
the
just know
current
that
models work the
there's
same
an
way.
assumption.
You don't know if the model's going to work again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's all up in the air. So the
Because
same
it's just
models that we
based
use to
on,
predict
like,
anything.
words.
Yeah, well, the same
It
models
has
that we use to
have a
predict
physical
anything,
model.
so long as the set is unknown, like what's going to happen in the stock market tomorrow. Questions like that are large sets that have many variables. You can, look at the numbers and say, well, there's a trend that shows that this is possible with all this mathematics and blah, blah, blah. But equally possible is if this string of things that listed exactly how the stock market closed every day for the last 50 years, you can, and it's been right for the last week and a half
I can imagine a spooky
since you started
thing.
looking at it.
I can imagine a spooky thing like that. But
Yeah, it's probably more predictive than any other model, or just as predictive, because there's still the massive uncertainty of what will happen next. But
what if
you have an
but it's
entire
the model.
history.
It's not like the lexical thing. That's like the separation. This is like that's a separate concept of imagining that good of a model of reality as opposed to like searching an infinite set of like words in a string.
Yeah, you wouldn't be searching the entire set just to find what will happen tomorrow every time. You would say, you would ask it what you'd say. You would literally have to go into this book or whatever it is, the thing, and find sets of strings that say this is the closing of the stock market for 1984, blah 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 blah. Did the date, and then you'd have to do it for the next like a week and a half, right? And then you'd have to check that string of characters against the next week and a half. Now, where you want to look is the one that's predicted the entire history of the stock market and is currently predicting day after day what's happening next. So the best predictive model, even though the next day could be complete rubbish.
But this takes the initial problem is using like infinite sets. Like whenever you talk about like infinite possibilities.
Because there could still be an infinite number of things.
There will be an infinite new set of things connected to the last set the day before, like the second before, however often it calculates.
Yes. And then we will keep getting closer and closer.
You will keep having
to a disagreement
in that exact moment. You'll have the most accurate description of reality ever for all of the past. But I don't know how you get into the future, because when you run the simulation again, you're going to get an infinite array of possibilities.
You're right.
What if you create an AI whose job it is
suck my dick
is to
create the future?
What if you create?
We've talked about that before.
The AI's job is to literally understand time
create
to a fundamental
the next
level.
Universe.
Yeah, to like literally create.
I think there's a short story about that. Actually.
Really?
I've never read it, but I've heard people talk about it.
Imagine AI getting smart enough where it's like just understands time so fundamentally that like it's like, oh yeah, this is just a thing I can manipulate now. And I now, because I can manipulate it, am the future. If you can start to manipulate time, you have to become the future. So as if you so choose to engage with it, I guess. You could be completely ambivalent to it and you could just watch it happen or unfold as it does. But that's like the question of free will. If you can start to control the future, where does the will part come in?
What is you controlling it?
Yeah, and can you be within the time frame that it's happening? Can we control our timeline?
Do you ever meditate and notice your thoughts coming out of this black, dark place, like that black box that you can't see into, that's your subconscious, and think, holy shit, I don't understand.
Well, yeah, I'm
just happening. Because it seemed like that's what we were talking about earlier.
Here's even what's creepier, right? Is that same concept, but the thoughts aren't in us. So these things are just uttering out of gelatin-sacked entities that like to fuck each other.
Right, and if you don't control
and then
your thoughts,
somehow it just builds the universe eventually. Somehow over enough iterations, these bubbling combinations. And by the way, a lot of people don't have an internal dialogue.
That's what I hear.
Which is weird.
That was a crazy thing to learn.
No.
No, dude, that would freak me out, dude.
There was someone on like a Twitch stream.
I don't think
his girlfriend, like they were reading about that, and he's like, "Did you know?" Like he's talking to his girlfriend. He's like reading it. It's like a lot of people don't experience an internal dialogue, and she's like, "What's that?" And he's like, "It's like where you watch the whole YouTube video about it," and she's like, "Wait, what are you talking? Were you saying that people actually can hear themselves inside their head?" And he's like, "What?" Yeah.
That'll ruin your relationship, dude.
It looked like it was about to. She like broke down. She's like, "What? I can't do that." And he's like, "What do you mean? Like, how do you think?" She's like, "I think when I talk. I talk to think. That is the thinking. It happens as I say things." He's like, "You don't have a voice in your head that's like kind of contemplating like, oh, what should I eat for dinner?" It's like, no,
thinking words.
I just feel hungry and I go and eat things. And you're like, oh, well, you're an NPC.
When you say to someone, do you think in words? And they say no, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
You don't think then, as far as I understand it.
I think
that's weird.
I think more like I can think in words, but I think in like pictorial archetypes of things, and then I like diminish it down to words. If that makes sense.
Wouldn't even
like generalization of
inducing the concept of an internal dialogue to somebody create that internal dialogue
Not
within
necessarily, because you'd have to have the neural structure to do so. So some people literally just don't have the structure in their brain. Like the
What if they're
synapses
just
aren't
like
there to
misunderstanding the question or something?
Yeah,
Like,
what
I
if
don't
Maybe
hear
a
they're
lot of
voices
people
so
in my
dumb.
head.
fundamentally misunderstand.
They might be so dumb that they're like, I don't hear voices in my head. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, because like the way the video explains it is very concrete. You know what I mean? Like it's
remember
very
this
hard
going
to like.
around. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's like a scientific definition, and like they can like prove based on like probably like neuroimaging that you can't do it. Like it's like a physical ability. Like it's literally like just like you not being able to like roll your tongue.
That's
You know.
scary, dude. Should we kill all those people?
Probably. I wonder what
Trust
percentage of
them.
people can't do that. Honestly,
I hope zero in America in 2023.
bro, I like. What if it is like 60% of
Vote
people?
for Brady.
Yeah, that's my political campaign.
I bet it's 70% of people. Because 70% of people take a creativity test and they're not creative at all. They score 0. That means 30% of people are doing all the creative lifting for the entire planet. And the other 70% are just like, yeah.
Well, it's probably a tiny fraction of that 30% too.
That even get the ability to have any influence. Technically, if it's the 30%, it would be 80% of that 30% would have no impact. 20%, it's like a Pareto distribution. 20% would actually have all of the impact.
Correct. And then that's fractal. And 20% of that 20% has the most effect.
Yeah. Just like wealth. Where like there's 20% of people are very, very wealthy. But 20% of that, like 20% are extremely wealthy. Like they are way wealthier than those people. And then it goes up until the distribution kind of flattens out. Like it flatlines. So you can't go up in wealth because there's not enough wealth. It kind of like flattens out at that point.
Well, there's only one richest person in the world.
That's not necessarily true. Because you can't determine
infinite richest people.
Yeah, because you got to look at assets. So assets are all determined based on assumptions of what that wealth means, right? And those assumptions vary based on demographic. So you might have like an oil mine somewhere. Like you can say the richest dollar amount someone has, like the U.S. dollar. You can say that this person has the most U.S. dollars that exist, right? And as far as that's calculable and to our understanding. But you can't say that they're the richest because someone could have assets that are that diminish the amount of dollars they have by magnitudes. Like if you own a country, that's a almost an immeasurably rich asset. So China or Xi Jinping might be the richest person in the world just because by the nature of his assets and his political power, he has domain over things that are just unfathomable to
That would
Elon.
be the richest person in the world, right?
Well, it depends because is Putin the richest?
I mean, whoever it is, there's a person who
And
has
then-
the most assets.
Well, it's not what you got. The value of the asset is what changes based on who is evaluating it. You see what I'm saying? You could say that the numerical value of a U.S. dollar in this particular time point, this person is the richest person. But that fluctuates 100 million times a second based on, like, day trading. Like, there's people in the stock market that literally, on the fractions of pennies, are trading quantities that are unheard of, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, they're betting, like, oh, this is, like, a fraction of a penny more valuable than that thing.
But if the richest person has so much more wealth than the rest of the 80% of that 20% that they're just like amplitudes
Eclipsing.
higher,
Yeah.
like that person is richer than anyone else by magnitudes beyond whatever the second richest person is. If you take the
No, because that's what I'm saying. That's why it flattens out. So the second richest person and the first richest person might be
Okay.
the richest person. You know what I mean? And the scale doesn't say that there's a person. 20% just means there is an accumulation of wealth among a small group of people. 20%. So the Pareto distribution says 80% of the wealth in the world is divided against, 80% of the population of the planet. The other 80% of the wealth of the world is divided amongst the 20% of people on the planet, and the other 20% of the wealth of the world is divided amongst the 80%. That's what the Pareto distribution is saying. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
80% of the world's wealth goes to 20% of the people. 20% of the world's wealth goes to 80% of the people. So we have to divide 20% of the world's wealth amongst 80% of the population of the planet. And then basically the Pareto distribution doesn't say like, oh yeah, you get down to an individual. It just says there is 20 more percent. So if once you scale up and you're talking about the 20% of the richest people, you're saying 20% of the wealth amongst the richest people is allocated to some subset of entities. And I guess you could technically get down to an individual level, but if assets are what's being measured by wealth at that point, then you're going to be constantly fluctuating between many different individuals who own a lot of things because the asset value keeps changing infinitely. Otherwise, there would probably be a king of the planet. You know what I mean? Because then they would just own everything. They would own so much more of everything. Yeah, so that the Pareto distribution breaks down the higher you go up the chain of people who have the largest amount of the wealth.
Makes sense. There's like...
And flat lines.
Once you get to the poorest of the poor, like you can't get more poor than being
having
poor.
no money. Yeah, and that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That have no money. Yeah. So you can't say like, oh, you're the poorest guy. It's like, that doesn't make sense.
Because a lot of people have zero money.
Yeah, so it just runs out. Like, and then when you get to the point where money isn't what your wealth is about, and it's assets, now you can't define how rich someone is. All right, what time is it? It's like too late to go out.
It's a good end of the podcast.
That is a good end to the podcast. Thank you for watching the Go Show.
Infinite fucking conversation right there.
Hell yeah. I want to run an idea by you before the podcast is over. Just really quick. I was thinking about capitalism and what's the other one? Marxism. It's Marxism? Communism. Thank you. So there's a period. So I was thinking about this, and I came to this conclusion that capitalism and communism are two sides of the same coin, right? Fundamentally. So the people who believe in capitalism believe, like literally, I looked up the definition. It's a government, but technically it's not a government. It's an economy in which all of the business in that economy is ran by people who own industry, by a private individual. For profit. It literally says for profit in how capitalism works. The only thing that people, in terms of like the pure definition of capitalism, that you create an industry as a private individual for profit. Not like for the betterment of society, but for profit, only to gain money. And then for communism, is basically, there's stages to communism, which makes it a little bit different, where communism doesn't exist unless you already have a system in place of it, because a revolution has to take place. Unless you want to get into like really deep Marxist theory, where the state of the universe, they like use like quantum physics to try to explain why communism is the perfect ideology, which is like really goofy to me. But they're like, everything is shared amongst all things because that's how physics works. Like, then why did physics ever make it unequal? you know, but there's a few books out there that try to explain communism as the perfect ideology because of physics, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Anyways, but communism, basically, you start with a revolution, and then you have the dictatorship of the proletariat. The proletariat is the person who is the worker, the working class, right? And then so, as the working class, you revolt against the current system to gain all of the stuff back for the proletariat that the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, have acquired over the time of them having private industry, right? So there's no private industry in communism. It can't exist. However, to get to the communist state, the pure communist state, you have to go through the process of the dictatorship of the proletariat. There has to be a revolution, and you have to elect people who, in the doctrine, are supposed to be able to be recallable immediately. It literally says that, recallable immediately. But you vest all of your power in as the worker to these people on the promise that they will deliver communism eventually when the revolution ends. And the promise is that they will give back all the power you gave them to create rules and like legislation to basically redistribute all of the wealth back to the working class. So that's what the power you're giving them. And the promise they give you is like you say, hey, you give us this power to revolt for you. And when the revolution's over, we'll give you all of the money from the bourgeoisie back. And we will make things equal and it'll be a classless society, right? There'll be no classes because everyone has the same amount of money. Like everyone has the same entitlement to everything that anyone else does is the premise. Like if you grew a potato, that's my potato now. If I want it. Same though for me. Like if I grew a potato, now it's your potato. We're classless, right? I can't say that, no, this is my potato and you need to give me something for it. There can't be any trade because now I'm a private business owner. You know what I'm saying? So that's the fundamental assertion of communism. Everything is for everybody. Everyone does something for someone else. Implicit, like literally, like without knowing that they're doing it. Right? You don't have to do it on purpose for other people. You implicitly do it. Now, here's what I've come to the conclusion of, is in a capitalist society, the promise is that you vote with your dollar. That's the promise, right? That is the thing that you buy into. Well, in a capitalist society, you give all of the power to the people who run the industry because inevitably they will have more money than the government. So they become the government, essentially, through indirect influence. So you're giving all of your money to the capitalist business owners, and their only thing is for profit. That is literally in the doctrine. They are only here for profit, and they will manipulate the government by any means necessary to gain more profit. That is in the doctrine of capitalism. It's literally how it works, which is actually kind of scary when you think about it. But they promise you that the dollar is so powerful that you can vote with your dollar. So give us all of the power by buying the stuff that we make because we'll make good stuff for you. And if we stop making good stuff for you, I guess you just don't pay for our stuff anymore. You vote with your dollar. Well, we all know that that promise doesn't work, especially when they start influencing policies that make things bad for people. And then you have things like Amazon where it becomes the only way you can even get anything now is through a company like that. So they give you the illusion that you can vote. What?
People choose to get things on Amazon because it's so convenient.
Yeah, but eventually the convenience, like Amazon uses its capital influence to buy up smaller and smaller places.
And people pick that over the smaller places, though.
Yeah,
they're voting with their dollar.
So not necessarily, though, because someone who would want to use the other place can no longer use the other place because it's gone out of business. So your choice becomes limited.
But that's those people are outnumbered by the people who wanted to use Amazon. It wasn't enough to keep that place afloat.
Yeah, but there isn't enough context given in the terms of the vote, right? So, and then eventually they can pass laws because of their influence of the dollar. So you're indirectly supporting things that you can't know the context of how you're voting. So it's not a vote anymore. Now you're forced to give people your dollar because that's how you live, right? I can't vote on my electrical company. That's just who I get to pick, right? For electricity.
But that's like, there's usually some sort of government, like,
Are we planning on?
They're private industries
Do you
that are
still
given.
want to go after this?
I mean, I guess if there's like anything to do, it's like already 11.
Yeah.
I gotta giddy up. It's like 10:06.
Oh, it's kind of still late though, right? Is it?
I don't know. I usually don't
usually
stay
go-
out as late as.
I don't think it's too late to go out if you're like, I don't know how late you guys usually stay out. We have to work.
I just feel like anything at like after like 1 is really
Down.
boring and lame, and it's almost 1 in my mind.
Yeah.
If you go out at 10, you get there at like 10:30. You need to like leave by like, why would we only go out for an hour? Yeah.
Okay. Let's.
I'll wrap it up. But so here's my point: is in the what you call it system, the capitalist system, you vote with your dollar, but then the flip side of that coin, in the communist system, you vote with the promise, you vote with your power as a worker, but with the promise that the power will be given back. Same thing in capitalism. The promise is that the power is within your dollar to decide how things are done because we are the industry. The industry kind of creates everything that you need. And then the people that you elect in the dictatorship of the proletariat are the ones who own the media, who own everything. You give them that power as a worker with the promise that they will give it back to you. The same thing happens in capitalism, but you do it with your dollar instead of this revolutionary force. And so what ends up really happening in my mind is they are the same people. They are the people who are super capitalists are exactly the same as the people who are super communists, because the process by which the power is distributed is always on a promise that can never be fulfilled. Because the goal at which either thing is trying to achieve doesn't exist. It can't exist.
I agree.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about that. I thought it was fucked up. I was like,
I think, yeah, like Braden was saying, the logic kind of breaks down once you get to the extreme.
yeah. And for the only way those systems work is at their extreme. They'll always lean towards their extreme, right?
Yeah.
When they start to be implemented.
Communism communism seems less viable, but I think that's just because, I mean, it's
not necessarily. It depends on the time frame. Well,
communism, like,
there has to be a revolution for communism, so it's already chaotic.
It seems like communism employs a narrative, like a specific string of events has to occur that make it like pretty much impossible. You're giving all the power to someone and then telling them, like, once you acquire all this power, give it away. And do it in a way so that everybody gets the same amount of power. It just is illogical.
Yeah.
It's more
literally illogical. It can't happen. That's not how people work. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But they think that, like, once you overthrow the government with these principles, you just give all these people power over the internet, the media industry, public services. You just give that to those people because they're fighting for you. You don't think that you think they're gonna give it back? What does even give it back mean? How do they give it back? They just create a new set of rules. And the only way that they continue to exist or even do anything for you is by you. It turns into capitalism because you still have to give them your money. Because those things still have to, during the revolution, have to be bought or made. And people aren't going to do things for free. You know what I mean? Even in a communist revolution, things aren't going to happen on a trust basis. You can't make a tank with trust. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. This is kind of like
it's so dumb. And then I was like, well, maybe the bedrock of like a
It's dumb and gay.
Exactly.
I'm glad we can all agree communism is dumb and gay. We got a dip, dude.
All right.
All right. That's the end of the Go Show. Thank you for watching. Love you all. Have a great night.
Love you, people, and other things.
Yeah. Can I take a hit of that before you go?
Yeah.
Is there still weed in here?
I haven't been smoking it. There's more weed right there that if you